Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for the Mother Della Morte show tonight. We're going to give everybody just a little bit of time to get in and get settled because tonight we are going to we're not going to have so much of a slideshow like we normally do or anything like that. We're going to talk about a really, really fun piece of kind of forgotten folklore that has to do with the United States and has to do with New Orleans in particular. So this is going to be a lot of fun. But we're just going to hang out in here while everybody kind of gets in, gets settled, grab you some popcorn, something to drink, a good beer or what have you, and we'll get started shortly. Hi, Raven. How are you? So glad to see you here. I hope everybody has had a great week. Hi, Damon. How are you? And let's see, we have Tyler. Hi, Tyler. How are you? Hope everybody, like I said, has had a great week so far and a good weekend. Hi, Calvin. How is everybody doing? Hi, Tom. Wow, we've got a lot of people in here. Hi, Little Bit. How are you? All right. Well, so tonight what we're going to do is we're going to do something a little bit different. I know a lot of times I bring you like creepy history and things like that. This, we're not going to focus so much on quote unquote history. Yes, there are a lot of historical elements to it that can be looked up. And these girls, they actually existed, but there's not a whole lot of information on them. It's kind of hard to find a lot of information on it. So tonight we are going to spin a story. Is what we're going to do. Whether true or not is not really up for debate. Hang on just one second. I think I'm getting a message. Hold on just a second. Okay. Yeah. No. All right. So it's not really up for debate on the actual physical truth or not. Sometimes the unknown and the mystery of a thing is what is most interesting and important. The story we are going to discuss tonight is folklore that we will weave into something of our own so that I can give you the most comprehensive version of this tale. And there are a lot of versions. Now, like I said, whether historical fiction or if it really happened, either way, it just makes for a really good story. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Casket Girls of New Orleans. And there may not be a lot of people out there that have actually heard about the Casket Girls of New Orleans. Now, one of the most unique cities in the South, if not the United States, is New Orleans. Often considered one of the most haunted cities in the U.S., if not the most haunted. It is a place of legend and folklore, from pirates and smugglers and ghosts and graveyards, voodoo, and yes, let's not forget the vampire. From Bram Stoker's Dracula, first published in 1897, to the glittery Cullen Clan of Twilight series fame, which Mother Della Morte says vampires do not sparkle. There's centuries worth of stories to draw upon when it comes to the vampire. And like a seemingly young yet actually undead bloodsucker, the history of vampire lore dates back as far as probably written history, or a lot. It goes back really, really far. The image of the seductive night walker we think of today was majorly shaped by pop culture dating back to around the 1800s. But the seeds of the modern concept have appeared in mythologies since the beginning of recorded history. And the tales of vampires have been circulating around New Orleans for hundreds of years. I bet you didn't know they went that far back. Now, today, at the corner of Chartres Street in the French Quarter of New Orleans, stands the finest surviving example of French colonial public architecture in the country. Louis XV style, formal and symmetrical, with restrained ornament. The old Ursuline convent facade is simple, with 12 bays, 2 floors, and an attic level made of 3 dormers. It was constructed between 1748 and 1752 for the Ursuline nuns, whose mission was to nurse the poor and teach the young girls. basically setting up kind of a hospital slash orphanage slash academy, so to speak. Now, founded in 1727 by the Sisters of the Order of St. Ursula, Ursuline Academy of New Orleans enjoys the distinction of being both the oldest continuously operating school for girls and the oldest Catholic school in the United States. The old Ursuline convent is also the oldest building in the Mississippi Valley. But what does this have to do with vampires, you may ask? Well, actually, it has to do with them a lot. There's a lot that this particular place has to do with the story tonight. The history of New Orleans, Louisiana, traces the city's development from its founding by the French in 1718, through its period of Spanish control, then briefly back to French rule before being acquired by the United States in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Before Europeans founded the settlement, the area was inhabited by Native Americans for about 1,300 years. Archaeological evidence has even shown settlements in the area dating back to at least 400 AD. So there were a lot of indigenous settlements and activity in that area way before the French came along and founded New Orleans. Now, French explorers, fur trappers, and traders eventually arrived in the area by the 1600s, some making settlements amidst the Native American villages of thatched huts along the bayou. New Orleans itself was founded in early 1718 by the French as, and this basically what its name was La Nouvelle Orleans, which basically means New Orleans, under the direction of Louisiana Governor Jean-Baptiste Le Mont de Bienville. And I probably really butchered that. After considering several alternatives, Bienville selected the site for several strategic reasons and practical considerations, including it was relatively high ground along a sharp bend of the flood-prone Mississippi River, which thus created a natural levee. It was adjacent to trading routes and portage between the Mississippi and Lake Pontchartrain via Bayou St. John, offering access to the Gulf of Mexico port of Biloxi. And it offered control of the entire Mississippi River Valley at a safe distance from other settlements such as Spanish and English colonial settlements. However, much of the colonial population in early days was of the wildest and in part of the most undesirable character. Deported galley slaves, trappers, and gold hunters, and by 1721, New Orleans was populated by frontiersmen and other hardy characters. The majority of the inhabitants of that distant outpost were also nothing but single men. So you see there is a problem here. From 1716 to 1722, vagabonds, deserters, and smugglers were exported from France to Louisiana as an administrative measure to relieve overcrowded jails, also known as transportation. It was one of the ways that like courts in England and places like that could use as a verdict if you were found guilty for anything. They could just basically send you off to the Americas or Australia, things like that. So it was transportation. Now, some persons of quality also arrived, although in lesser numbers. Other grievances, such as being deemed an introvert libertine, so in other words, you really liked everything at excess, or to basically be what they considered out of control. Now, these could also land a body in the rough new territory. Now, Bienville, understanding that this was a problem, not only for morale, but population growth, took a page from New France, also known as Quebec, and their recent history. France at this time, because basically France at this time owned a really large swath of territory from New France or Quebec that is stretched all the way down to what we know today as Louisiana. And these, so basically what they did is in the history of Quebec, they had a kind of a program that was called, it was referred to as the King's Daughters, or in French, which I'm going to really butcher, is the Filles du Roi. This is a term used to refer to approximately 800 young French women who immigrated to New France, Quebec, between 1663 and 1673 as part of a program sponsored by King Louis XIV. The program was designed to boost New France's population both by encouraging male colonizers to settle there and by promoting marriage, family formation, and the birth of children. While women and girls certainly migrated and immigrated to New France both before and after this time period, they were not considered the Filles du Roi, as this term refers to women and girls who were actively recruited by the government and whose travel to the colony was paid for by the king. So basically what Benville did is he petitioned King Louis XV, which was, because it was later in years, for women. We need women. We have nothing here but men, and we need women if we want this settlement to grow. But unlike the King's Daughters, what Benville received was something quite different. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick, and then we'll get into this a little bit more. Let's see. Lots of comments here, and I'm going to try not to stick my finger in people's faces. All right, let's see. Hi, Patricia. Hi, Dom's mom. Hi, John. Hi, Angela. And then Little Bit says, I know, it's amazing, New Orleans. It really is. If you have not visited New Orleans, especially the French Quarter, it's something you must put on your bucket list. There is really no way to describe just the atmosphere. It feels like you're in a completely different place, like it's its own entity. And it's just so much fun, so much mystery. You could just feel the history. But a little bit, you are absolutely right. It is an amazing place. And then she says, Dominic sparkles. Yes, Angela, we're going to be talking about vampires tonight. And then John says, it seems that New Orleans has more horror stories than any other city. It has a lot. It has a lot. Other than, the further reaches of like the northern East Coast, Louisiana has a lot, especially New Orleans. Hi, Jennifer. How are you? Hi, Liz. Hi, Maud. Yes, Tom, words are hard. Words are hard, especially when half your face is made of bone. Especially when it's French. Absolutely. There was a reason Odd Mama did not take French back in school. Hi, Chris. How are you? Hi, Beth. And so Liz says, that's our new slogan. So much history, it lends to the mystery. That's great. I like that. And then Chris says, doesn't sound all ooh la la in the Deep South. No, it does not. No, it does not. And I cannot speak Cajun, and I do not have a Cajun accent, so I can't do that either. And then John says, I was in New Orleans once, working there after Hurricane Katrina. Most of the town was still waist deep in water. Yes, the last time I was there, John, was actually the following, like, summer season, right after that, right after Katrina. So maybe, I don't know what, like 9 or 10 months after the hurricane. It was cleaned up really, really well, but yeah, you could still see there was a lot of damage. All right, so let's get back to what we were talking about. So like I said, Benville, he petitioned the king. We need women. We need to have babies. We need women. But Benville apparently he just wasn't that smart, and he wasn't very specific, because what he received were 400 women of questionable morals, prostitutes, poor and diseased, and women ruled by the courts for, like I said, transportation due to criminal offenses. Now, although there was great rejoicing by the men, and although morale may have improved amongst them as well, the city fathers did not consider these women marriage and family material. So in 1719, Benville, again, along with his brother, sent another request to the king. This time, they requested a better selection of immigrants for the colonies. And this time, they received 23 women, docked in Biloxi, and today are known as the Pelican Girls. And they are named after the ship that transported them, which was Les Pelicans. These weren't prostitutes or convicts, and as many forced colonists had been in the past, but women largely penniless, recruited from orphanages and convents, with few prospects in France, and some were even said to have been kidnapped along the way. Though more encouraged by the new arrivals, and there was more rejoicing by the men, these still were not the filles du roi. This time, requests were also sent to the Bishop of Canada to send respectable women to New Orleans to help settle the country. He was asked to send young women who were both virtuous and known to have a good reputation. And in 1728, they arrived. The port of New Orleans bustled with activity as the ship entered the port. Groups of men began to gather, shouting and talking amongst themselves. Handpicked by the Bishop of Quebec on order of the king, the young women were all of appropriate age and background. And on their agenda was only one thing: to make a good match and marry one of the French colonists inhabiting the budding Louisiana colony. However, as the women disembarked and were ushered down the wooden plank onto the soiled ground, their appearance was a far cry from the hale and hearty young women the settlers had been led to expect. 6 young women, pale, gaunt, and emaciated, and to their chests each clutched a coffin-shaped torso, or small chest, also known as a cassette, that held all of their belongings. Appearing to the eager male onlookers as almost more dead than alive. Pale, the Frenchmen all muttered to themselves as they spotted the women meant to become their brides. So very pale were the girls that their skin reddened and blistered within moments of enduring the hot tropical sun. Upon the sight of them, however, rumors began to circulate throughout the town. And needless to say, joy upon their arrival quickly faded, replaced with doubts and suspicions. Clutching their casket-shaped chests in tight grips, the young women, also known as the filles la cassette, as they were to become known, were brought to their new home. And until their respective marriage, they were to remain under the care and the protection of the Ursuline nuns. Deposited behind the Ursuline convent walls, those girls became boarders, or some say inmates. And as far as the oddly shaped torsos, they were said to be stored on the 3rd floor of the convent, with strict instructions from the girls that they were not to be removed or opened until each girl found the proper suitor, as presumably they held their belongings, though no one for sure knew what they had actually brought with them on their journey. All that was certain is that after they arrived, the mortality rate in the area skyrocketed. To be more precise, the infant mortality rate was highly effective. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. It looks like we're getting a lot of them. Let's see. Yes, Chris, this is when the maybe Southern Belle started to show up. And then Beth says, yes, the Canadians were quite fortuitous. John says, what do you expect? You go to the New World to get a fresh start. You get the best and the worst. Yes, and it seemed like poor Benville just really, really needed a lesson on being specific. No, John, the first few groups were not the pick of the crop, that's for sure. All right, let's see. Hi, Siren, how are you? All right. Hi, Roots Bleed Red, how are you? Okay. I think we have, yes, we've gone over the newest comments. Okay. All right. So we know that they disembarked and now they're being housed with the Ursuline nuns with the request that their trousseaux or cassettes not be opened until each girl finds a proper suitor. Nevertheless, the nuns of the Ursuline convent, who'd been tasked with the care of the girls, managed to arrange their marriage or marriages. But a life in the swamp with French colonists wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. Rumor goes that some of the Casket Girls just simply disappeared, while others slipped away in the dead of night to return to France, leaving no trace and only their creepy hope chests behind. Later, when the nuns returned to the third floor, what they found were not dowries, but that the chests were completely empty. They spared no section of the third floor during their research or during their search, though they were never able to find any type of belongings or recover anything. It was just basically what the girls had brought with them were empty boxes. The fear of what had escaped those caskets even brought the archdiocese to the convent, where they took all the caskets and locked them in the third floor storage area. And the reason I'm calling them caskets is because cassettes and the shape of them, you can look them up, were very similar to small coffins or caskets. And so they were known to be called caskets. Also fearing that the young women might have been something other than what they said they were, and fearing that something supernatural was afoot, the Ursuline nuns spared no expense in making sure that nothing ever left that third floor space. The doors were bolted shut, and the nails to the windows were blessed, 800, by the Pope himself, locked in place, unlike any other windows really in the French Quarter. So they basically used these blessed nails to nail the shutters closed, which they are still that way today. It wasn't long, however, before rumors then began to circulate in the city. The girls hadn't brought French clothes in those chests. They had brought French vampires. Or had they, in fact, been vampires themselves? So you might ask, wait, Odd Mother, these dates don't really add up. If the Ursuline nuns didn't arrive in New Orleans until 1727, and the girls come to shore, basically to Louisiana, in 1728, the old Ursuline convent wasn't completed until 1751. Now, that's because the first building of the Ursuline nuns in New Orleans was there was actually a first building. The one that stands today is actually the second building. Now, this first building was designed by a gentleman by the name of Ignace Francisco Brutin in 1727, when the nuns arrived in New Orleans. There are existing drawings showing the building in 1733, though it was not officially finished until that year. So they lived in it before 1733 because it was a three-story building, but it wasn't considered officially complete until 1733. Now, the first building was made from what they refer to as comblage, which is half timbers, or what is also referred to as brick between posts. This was a major form of French colonial construction in the colony during the 18th century. However, such construction proved to be inappropriate for the humid climate of New Orleans, with significant deterioration already apparent in their first building by 1745. It also was a tremendous fire hazard by that time. And basically, my understanding of that first building is that it was just so heavy, and a lot of the ground in New Orleans, unless you're lucky to find, like a really high spot, it's pretty much marsh when it comes down to it. And so basically the building started to sink, the floors started to fall in, the walls kind of started coming apart. Within 10 years, it was unlivable. So what happened is the first convent was dismantled, and as the newer one, and then the newer one was built, with some of the material being reused, including, which you can see today, the winding cypress staircase with cast iron handrails. That staircase now occupies part of the ground floor entry hall. Now, the second building was completed in 1751, and that is the one that is in use today. The first one no longer exists. It was actually bought by the city and sold to an industrial park. So, but what we're going to do right now is we're going to break for a quick midway point. Grab you something else to drink. We've got a brand new show coming tomorrow night, and so we're gonna give you a little preview. So we'll be right back. And we're back. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick, and then we're gonna start talking about the second building again. We may wind up finishing up a little early. Let's see, but that's okay. Oh my goodness, so many comments, so many comments. Okay, let's see. And then Ashley says, I'm doing all right. How about you? We are doing very well here in the crypt, and we are so glad you joined us. Said, I want that shirt so I can model it for you. Yay. And then Roots Bleed Red says, oh my God, yes, thank you for reminding me. Hit me up. Oh, okay, so you are talking about the shirt. Okay, awesome, 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 awesome. And then Angie says, hey, admin. We always, and guys, we really give the love to the man and the woman behind the curtain, because they are absolutely awesome. Our admins are absolutely awesome, and all of our content creators are absolutely awesome. So please show the love, and we really, really do appreciate you guys as well. And then Roots Bleed Red, see, I can't even talk tonight, says, this is such a cool subject. Yeah, and there's a lot of video that you can find, or podcasts that you can find that actually discusses the Casket Girls, but there's not a lot of written information. You really have to dig for it, because they're like blurts in history. It's really strange. It's really, really strange. And the Beth says, I'm really enjoying this. I like it. Well, thank you. And Ashley, you rock too. Hi, Charlie. How are you? I do believe that you may be new here in the crypt. We always love new victims. Let us know where you're from, and we are so glad you're here. Hi, Chaos. How are you? All right. All right. Well, good night, Damon. Have a good night. And then Angie says, how old are you, Odd Mother? Well, Odd Mother is somewhere between 168 years old and 424. So, but you know, a well-bred corpse does not reveal her age. All right. And so Charlie says that he is from Pennsylvania. Awesome. We've got some content creators from that area as well as a lot of fans. So thank you for joining us, and we're so glad you're here. All right. So let's get on to the second building, basically. So the second building was completed in 1751. Rumor has it that though the Ursuline nuns were known for piety and simplicity, a large parade was thrown on moving day to distract from the wagon's suspicious cargo, one of which resembled 6 boxes that traveled inconspicuously behind the procession. Not much more is known about the Casket Girls of New Orleans, and eventually the story of the Filles la Cassette would be forgotten and basically fade into history. That is, of course, until 1978, a whole 250 years after the Casket Girls' arrival. A couple of amateur reporters decided to investigate the window business. And what I mean by the window business is, first of all, why they're always shut, which is an oddity in a place like Louisiana and New Orleans. And also, why one window always had the strange habit of opening in the middle of the night. After being denied access to the convent's attic by none other than the Archbishop, they climbed the convent wall and spent the night outside, waiting for the attic window to open. But was it simply just the story of the Casket Girls that piqued their interest? For anyone that has the pleasure of visiting the French Quarter, it doesn't take long to realize that most stories of this area are never really written down, but instead are passed on the lips of the locals as to what really takes place and what really happens there. Some time ago, the city replaced the walls surrounding the convent after they were found to be leaning into the street. Tearing them down, they found countless bones surrounding the walls. After some testing, they found that all the bones belonged to infants, most likely housed in the convent at that time when it was being used for an orphanage. Most assuredly, these infants fell victim, most likely to plague at the time, though there was talk about the creatures still locked away on the 3rd floor. So what became of the reporters? Well, it is said that the next morning their decapitated bodies were found on the steps of the convent, and there didn't seem to be evidence of much of a struggle. What was evident, however, was their bodies were completely extenuated with ripped wounds over their drained bodies, and that their murders have never been solved. Now, an interesting fact is that in the most pristine lab conditions, it's only humanly possible to remove about 70% of a person's body supply, blood supply before the veins collapse on themselves. Even hanging a person upside down and completely severing every major artery in the neck, you could not successfully and completely extenuate a person. It begs the question, what thing could possibly have the power to drain a person of their entire blood supply without eating them whole? And that, even though it's early, is the story of the Casket Girls of New Orleans. So what we're going to do is we're just going to chat a little bit. I do have a little bit more information. Now, interestingly, years later, let's see, and Maud says my ex-wife had that. I've known some people like that too, Maud. I've known some people like that too. Interestingly, though, one of the Pelican Girls, and I did not write that information down, and I meant to. She was like one of the most famous Pelican Girls. The Pelican Girls actually came in through Mobile, and pretty much settled around that area. And for the most part, the Pelican Girls stayed. There were some that moved on, maybe back up to Canada or went back to France just because it wasn't what they had been promised. But one that is very famous, being that she married into higher society. Well, her husband died. She remarried. That husband died. So I think she may have remarried again. There were 2 or 3 marriages. All of the husbands had died. She winds up moving to New Orleans. She stays there till she passes away, supposedly. They bury her along with, I guess, what would be considered like a family of some sort. Well, later on, the land was actually bought by like a private contractor, like the city or a private contractor. And the story goes that what happened is that they had to disinter the bodies that were buried there, including hers, and they wound up reburying them on land that they wound up building a church over. So it was almost as if they were interned under a church rather than something like, say, a catacomb or something like that. And I just find that really, really peculiar for New Orleans, because usually ground burial is not the most efficient way in that area. And then to build a church on top, like literally on top of the graves, I find that kind of neat, because the Pelican Girls and the Casket Girls, sometimes you'll find in history that they're kind of somewhat intertwined. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And then Roots Bleed Red says, what about Madame LaLaurie? Yeah, the voodoo queen of New Orleans. LaLaurie, I'm sorry, Madame LaLaurie, not the voodoo queen. Yeah, Madame LaLaurie. Now, I know that's really creepy. And I know that when I went down to New Orleans myself, they don't really like to talk about the LaLauries, and everything that happened up in their attic with like the supposed experiments and things like that on slaves. We had a really hard time finding the building, because when we went, it was probably the mid 2000s. Well, it was right after Katrina. So that was, I think, what, mid 2000s, something like that, maybe going into the latter part of the 2000s. Was it like 2003? So that would have been the earlier part, something like that. Anyway, there wasn't a whole lot online about the LaLaurie home, like where it was located. And we had a really hard time finding it. We finally did, but the locals don't like to talk about it at all. But basically, the LaLauries was a family. And there's a couple of different versions. The husband was a surgeon, some say, but Miss LaLaurie was extremely cruel. Both her and her husband were extremely cruel to the enslaved people that they owned. And it is said that they would do experiments such as cutting off legs and arms and then sewing them onto other people and things like that. And even one young slave girl, because she pulled Miss LaLaurie's hair when she was brushing her hair, was thrown out the second-story window. So they were just horrible, horrible people. The people of New Orleans finally found out what was going on, and basically it was the whole, like pitchforks and torches and things like that. But the LaLauries got away like just in time, wound up moving back to Europe, where I guess they lived out the rest of their lives. but yeah, it's a creepy story. It's a creepy story, and they don't really like to talk about it down there. And the Beth says she sounds like a Black Widow. Oh, you mean the Pelican girl from Mobile? Yes, or maybe she was a vampire. Who knows? All right. And then John says, I don't know how people made it through then with such a high infant mortality rate. Yeah, it was, some of the history, because like I said, it was really hard to find a lot of information on the Casket Girls from a historical standpoint. But there was a lot of like yellow fever and dysentery and things like that, to the point that it was not uncommon to just basically run across bloated dead bodies like in the drinking water in the reservoirs and things like that. Um, it, it I couldn't imagine it, but I think it's probably because we've been so like removed from death itself. Like it doesn't affect us like it used to affect people back then, as far as directly related. Like we have a much higher mortality rate is what I'm trying to say. And John says, what's with the caskets? Why were they empty? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But it is said that they are still to this day locked up in on the third floor. And if you go, and this is another interesting thing that I completely forgot to put down in my notes, if you go to their website for the old convent, because you could take tours, they've got like a little museum and stuff like that in there. They still like there have been very, very few like reporters and like bloggers and people like that that have been able to gain access to the third floor. The third floor, at least when one lady was able to access that area, that she was given permission and was given like a quick tour through the area, is completely empty. And if you also are, somewhat familiar with the French Quarter, space is prime. Like, I can't think of any building in the French Quarter area, and this is right down near Cafe Du Monde, is where the convent, the old Ursuline convent, is located, that doesn't make use of that space. Now, the pictures that particular person was able to get shows that the attic space or the third floor is sectioned off per dormer because it's got 3 dormers. 2 were completely empty. Now, 1 had all the slats in the floor removed. It still had the subfloor, if you wanted to call it a subfloor, but had some very unique shaped indentations in the floor. And it wasn't the beams. It looks like there were actually areas for large boxed or chest-like things to be put into these slots, and those were empty. The other room was completely empty. The last room was unusual because it had it had a Dutch door where you could open it from the top or bottom, and the third had floors made of bricks with shackles on the walls. And the excuse that this particular podcaster or reporter was given was that during that time when they actively used that particular convent as an academy, because they have a third building now that's huge, that they actually use for the academy, the girls' academy now. But that section was used for people that may have suffered from like mental disturbances, since they were a girls' school for like orphans and things like that. That the door would keep them from having to actually go in the room and put themselves in danger. They would be able to hand out like food and things like that through the double door. And the chains were used to shackle and restrict some of the more dangerous patients that they had. But of course, the whole area up there now is still empty, supposedly. And at least from the pictures, they are. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And then so Roots Bleed Red says the Laurie was a horrible woman. She was in French high society. Hold on just a second. French high society, who was brutal to her slaves. Very, very brutal. And I didn't even read that, and I was agreeing with you. And one day, while punishing one of the blood, the blood splattered across her face. She is said to be to begin a regiment using the blood of some of her slaves. So she was very similar to Elizabeth Bathory too. I've heard those stories as well. And then John says, I remember you told the Laurie story. It was gruesome. Actually took their slaves away for cruelty. They did, and that was, and that was saying something big back then, because, it was just a different time. People did not understand the folly of their ways. I'm glad that we're not in anything like that now, but it's really saying something when the whole town gets so irate at a high society, a high standing family, for the cruelty of how they treat their servants and their slaves. So yeah, it's a very scary story. And the really kind of odd thing too is that their home, which is on the corner of one of the streets, normally 9 times out of the 10, it remains empty. It's been a bed and breakfast. It's been like an apparel shop. It's been all kinds of different things. But the businesses don't normally stay there for one reason or another. I do remember seeing an interview once of the couple that owned the bed and breakfast there. They did not have rooms on the 3rd floor, but they said at night you could hear chains rattling and people walking across the floor from the upstairs attic area. And then John says New Orleans seems like the worst place for a city. It's a swamp. Yeah, most of it is. But it's still a neat place. Oh my goodness. If you have not gone, you have to go. You absolutely have to go. And weird things will happen to you when you're there. And I know that I've told this story before, but when we actually went to, what is it? The St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Where Madame Louvet is buried. It's also where the big circular mausoleum that they had a shot of in Easy Rider. So we went to that cemetery to do a tour. Let me tell you, if you're not from that area, if there is a mausoleum with an unlocked door, do not open it. They do not intern their dead the way that most of the United States does. It's done a little bit differently. And what you are going to see if you do that is quite unpleasant. I wasn't thinking. I go to that big circular mausoleum and notice, oh, the door is cracked. Now, me being from Georgia, and our mausoleums are completely different because usually you can go into a mausoleum. I opened the door and saw bones and bones and bones and bones and bones. And when I went to scream, there were gnats everywhere. I swear to God, a gnat flew down my throat. So yeah, weird things will happen to you when you go to the French Quarter. And then Beth says, I wonder if those caskets were full of dirt, like supposedly Dracula brought with him. I don't know. If you really research, Beth, the folklore on vampires, there's a lot of different versions. Again, what we know is vampires, and what show up in a lot of the movies and books and things like that was more shaped by the pop culture of the 18 and 1900s, and was really pushed along the way because of Bram Stoker's Dracula. But there are folklore that really put them as more of a spirit type thing that don't need the dirt. Just all kinds of different things. So I don't know. That's a good question. And then Liz says, I want to go to New Orleans so bad. I want to go back. It's New Orleans in the French Quarter is like tattoos. You can't have just one. You can't go just once. You've got to go several times because you really just can't see everything in one visit. And I think we were there for 3 or 4 days, and there was a lot of stuff we were not able to see. And then Liz says, I wanted to move to Lafayette, Louisiana. I had a family member that used to live in Lafayette or Lafayette. We say Lafayette here in Georgia, but it's Lafayette. And then Angie says, I've been to New Orleans. It's a fun place. The city never sleeps. And that's really good for us night owls because you can sleep like a cat. Nothing shuts down. The city never sleeps. So you can go to your hotel room, sleep for 2 or 3 hours, get back up. Go to your hotel room, sleep for 2 or 3 hours, get back up. You do wind up losing the days, though. And then Maud says, Odd Mother swallowed a corpse. Nat. Actually, Natalie is locked up in a box upstairs, a cassette upstairs. And then Angie says, I love the movie Misery. Yeah, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. And she is a great actress. You're absolutely right. I'm your #1 fan. And then John says, I want to go to Mardi Gras some year. I think, honestly, yes, I want to go just to say I went. But I think I would rather go around Halloween time when they have the big Halloween parades. I know when we went was Memorial Day, and it was, or Memorial Day weekend, I should say. And it was so crowded then. I could only imagine on Mardi Gras. And then Liz says, I'm sad we didn't get to do the meetup we planned last year, but it's for the best. I'm glad we can plan the meetup for another year. Yeah, I think, the Rona kind of threw a wrench into everybody's plans for last year. Hi, Joshua. How are you? And then Joshua says, I live less than 2 hours away. Good place to get murdered. Yes, now they do have a very, very high murder rate. That's just the violence and murder rate. It's just always been there. So yes, if you go, be careful, especially at night. Stay to basically the lit streets and try to avoid some of the side streets and pass-throughs when it gets dark. Stay on the main furways is what I would say, like Bourbon Street and things like that at night. All right. Hi, Calvin. How are you? All right. So we're almost done here. So I also want, and I put this in here because it was just important to me. I wanted to make sure I did not forget it. I want to make sure that all you guys know that we really, really appreciate you guys as our supporters and our content artists because they do really hard work, and you guys have really shown the love by supporting our streams. But like I said, to all the content artists out here, they work really hard. So if you haven't caught some of the shows, give it a try. They work really hard for what they do, and they really have some really good content. Now, if you like what I do and want to support me, you can go to the website and visit our coffee shop. In our coffee shop, you have kind of a drop-down window, and you just simply choose Mother de la Morte, and you can buy me a coffee through Ko-Fi. You can do the one-times or the reoccurrings, but it's just a way to show your support rather than doing like patrons and things like that, or patrons, to where it's like a monthly thing. We do have that option up on our website for many of our content artists. And if you're feeling exceptionally generous, you can buy us all a coffee. Now, we do have the new show premiering tomorrow night, which is The Battle Haven with James Jackal Monkey Carnes. That will start at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then on Friday, I will be joining Roots Bleed Red for a two-part series. It'll be part one. And we're going to be discussing the Zodiac Killer. If I had to pick a serial killer, because I love mysteries, I always like the ones that have never been really resolved, like Jack the Ripper and things like that. So we're going to be talking about the Zodiac. Part two will be next Wednesday. So we're going to talk about the murders. We're going to talk about the facts that we know. We might get into some other things, but next Wednesday on my show will be part two, and we're going to get into some conspiracy theories, some ideas of who we think may have been the Zodiac, and maybe link that to some other murders and things that were never solved, that may share some similarities. So definitely tune in for that. We'll be having on Friday night the Tom and Dom show. And I believe that Cemetery Joe will be on later that evening after Roots Bleed Red. Then Saturday, we have a really big and pretty spread out group of shows for you. Let's see, Otis and the Night of the Living Dreads, their crossover feed, their Scurry Face feed. It will start at, I believe, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then we will be joined by the Psychosocial Hour, which is also with the Night of the Living Dreads crew. And that starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then we'll be having the Sinister Sisters. They'll be coming on around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Tom's World, we will be on at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday night. So that's all going to be on Saturday night. Lots to watch, lots to do. And then Sunday, we'll be having the sideshow. And I believe that they start, I want to say 7:30 Central Standard Time. But we always put out like little blurps before they come on. Then Monday will be Mikey's new show. And then Tuesday is Creepy Parlor. And then it'll be back around to me. So I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And then John says, local to me is an unsolved serial killer, the Mad Butcher of Kingsborough. Ooh, that's interesting. Oh, Steve the Cat. Yes, Steve the Cat. If you have not caught Steve the Cat on Monday, please do so. It is so much fun. And he does a lot of like movie reviews. And these are like good movie reviews. Like the movies, because a lot of us have been locked inside with all the Rona stuff going on. You're hitting all these movies that maybe you hadn't checked out before. And he's given a lot of good advice on some of the ones that him and his handler, Mark, Steve the Cat, have viewed, and giving you kind of some insight on that. So don't forget Steve the Cat on Mondays. That comes on at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But anyway, I hope you guys have a pleasant week and pleasant nightmares. See you guys Friday. Bye.